Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending from where you're joining us from, and thank you for your patience. I am Zubayda Akbar, WHRD from Afghanistan and the Afghanistan Program Manager with Femena. I have the honor of co-moderating this event today. As we mark the 5 years since the fall of Afghanistan and the Taliban's return to power, we refuse to allow this anniversary to belong to the Taliban. We refuse to let those who impose violence, exclusion, and fear become the central characters in today's Afghanistan's story. Today, we center the women who continue to resist in Afghanistan and those across our region who continue to stand beside them while fighting their own battles against authoritarianism, fundamentalism, militarization, occupation, displacement, and erasure. For 5 years, the women of Afghanistan have continued to protest, write, teach, organize, create, document, and speak, often at immense personal risk. They have resisted in the streets, in secret classrooms, through art and poetry, from exile, and through the daily acts of refusing to disappear. This event is about that resistance. It's about the solidarity, not as a symbolic gesture, but as a political commitment and shared responsibility. Our struggles across our region are not identical, but they are connected. When we listen to one another, translate one another's words, preserve one another's stories, and stand together across borders, we challenge the isolation and erasure on which oppressive regimes depend and survive. Poetry has always carried truths that power attempt to silence. Through this event, together we remember those who have been killed, persecuted, imprisoned, or forced into exile. But we also celebrate the women who continue to imagine freedom, create beauty, and build a different future. Afghan women are not only survivors of this moment. They're its writers, witnesses, poets, artists, organizers, and leaders. We have gathered not to commemorate tyranny, but to honor resistance and to strengthen the solidarity that will carry it forward. This event is an extension of the Power to Afghan Women campaign, which Rawadari and Femena started in protest of the Taliban's ban on women's voices in 2024 and collected and published tens of messages of solidarity from across the globe. The event is co-organized by 4 organizations united by a commitment to human rights, feminist resistance, memory, and solidarity. Femena supports women human rights defenders, their organizations, and feminist movements across the Swana and Asia regions, particularly in contexts affected by repression, conflict, and shrinking space. I also want to take this opportunity to introduce a new Femena initiative focused on the stories of women of Afghanistan in their own words, the Rasa platform. Rasa is born from our creative writing program, where women are provided training in creative writing, and their writings and any other form of resistance is published on the Rasa platform. We speak to artists, writers, poets, musicians, and women from all walks of life through Rasa. Rawadari, another organizing partner for this event, is an Afghan human rights organization working to document violations, strengthen Afghanistan's human rights community, and advance the vision of an equal and peaceful Afghanistan. I will let my wonderful co-panelists introduce the other 2 organizations in just a minute. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for standing with the women of Afghanistan and with women resisting injustice across our region. I have the honor and pleasure of moderating this event with my dear colleague Ayşe Gül, a prominent Turkish feminist, an academic, and a dear ally of the women of Afghanistan. I pass the mic to her for her opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Zubeyda Can. It's an honor to be here with you, with all of you. I'm really happy and excited that we were able to get together today to let the women of Afghanistan and all the women around the world know that they're not alone, we're not alone as we go through our dark moments. And I feel humbled by the courage, wisdom, strength, and creativity of the women of Afghanistan, both the women and girls in Afghanistan itself, who are living through an unfathomable regime of gender apartheid and cruelty, as well as the women in the diaspora who are missing their beloved Afghanistan and finding the most creative ways of remaining connected and in solidarity with women on the ground. I feel particularly privileged to have met and become friends with Sharzad Akbar of Rawadari and Zubeyda Akbar of Femena in the past 5 years. Sharzad and Zubeyda humble and inspire me with their wisdom, sharp critique, and the beautiful ways in which they embody and enact the most creative forms of solidarity. Of course, I'm not the only one inspired by them, by all the people who contribute to Rawadari, Femena, and all the other organizations that are doing the most difficult and courageous work of enacting solidarity in these dark times. In 2022, Shahrzad Akbar received the International Hrant Dink Award in Istanbul, and in 2025, Femena was the recipient of the 2025 Women of the Year Award given by an Istanbul-based NGO, Ses Equality and Solidarity Association. And in the same list of the 2025 Women of the Year Award was the Istanbul Gender Museum, and we're privileged and honored to be co-hosting the event with them as well. So today we are joined by Meral Akkent, the founder of the Istanbul Gender Museum, and before that, the Istanbul Women's Museum. Meral Akkent is a feminist sociologist and activist who has been working at the intersections of gender, memory, and political inclusion for decades. She's also an embodiment of solidarity in its most beautiful and creative forms. I continue to learn so much from her. And I'm here, Ayşegül Altınay, on behalf of the Yer Gök Dayanışma Derneği, Earth Sky Solidarity Association. But I've also had the great privilege of being involved in the Istanbul Women's Museum and Istanbul Gender Museum, co-organizing many events and exhibitions with Meral and our wonderful colleagues in the museum. At the beginning of this year, 2026, following the SES Awards, we came together as Rawadari, Femena, Istanbul Gender Museum, and Earth Sky Solidarity to imagine two things: an exhibit that builds on the inspiring Power to Women, Power to Afghan Women campaign, and this exhibit will be curated by the Istanbul Gender Museum in collaboration with Femena, Rawadari, and Earth Sky Solidarity. And the second thing we imagined was this event, marking the 5th anniversary of the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan by recognizing, as Zubeyda Can was saying, the creative and courageous resistance of the women of Afghanistan. So we'll be sharing poetry with you today. And at the end of the event, after we hear the poems by Afghan, Syrian, and poets from Turkiye, we will listen to Meral Akkent from the Istanbul Gender Museum, who will show us a video and launch the exhibits, the power that builds on the Power to Afghan Women campaign. And we will be asking for your contributions to the exhibit as well. So please stay tuned for that too. So I guess we will start with the poets from Turkiye. Zubeyda Can, that's how we will start, right?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to make a point for our participants and our panelists that the event today is being recorded and it's also being live streamed on Rawadari Facebook page. Please go ahead, Ayşegül, with our poets from Turkey.
Great. So we will be introducing our poets and hearing their poetry, which will be followed by a Q&A, as Zubeyda Can said, and we will be asking you some questions during the quick Q&A as well. So we will invite your contributions and participation through the chat at that point. So I'm truly honored to introduce our first poet today, Aylin Vartanyan Dilaver, who is an educator, researcher, and facilitator in the field of expressive arts. After many years of teaching critical reading and writing at Boğaziçi University, as well as peace education, she now serves as core faculty at the Expressive Arts Institute Istanbul and is also one of the co-founding members of Earth Sky Solidarity. Since 2011, Aylin has facilitated expressive arts-based workshops with diverse communities, exploring grief, intergenerational memory, aesthetic witnessing, and ecopoiesis. Her writing brings together personal memory, collective witnessing, and arts-based research in the most creative forms. She's also a founding member of the Paresia Collective, which is also doing incredibly inspiring work on Armenian women in this part of the world. So I will pass it to Aylin to hear her beautiful poem. Thank you, Aylin, for being with us today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for organizing this wonderful event. I'm honored to be part of this event and sharing my poem I'm not a poet. It emerged as part of a work I did with Armenian women living in Istanbul. And I will be reading it both in English and Turkish. Here it goes. Composting silence. I went underground too. I put my hands into the dark soil and listened. From the earth, an image emerged. A hand holding a dried leaf, a daisy rising behind it, debris and life in the same frame. The angel stood beside me. She did not separate what was dead from what was growing. The dried leaf becomes compost. That is what we are here for, not to erase what was buried, but to let it feed new forms. So, I ask again, standing at the threshold, are you a spring unto yourself? From what was once buried, something living keeps emerging. Thank you. And now in Turkish, maybe for the Turkish listeners, I wish I could speak other languages too, but this is all I can do for today. Suskunluğu çürüte çürüte yeşertmek. Ben de indim toprağın altına ve soktum ellerimi toprağın karanlığına, kulak verdim. Bir resim çıka geldi topraktan. Bir el, avucunda kupkuru yaprak. Ardında başını kaldırmış bir papatya. Ölüsü dirisi aynı karede dünyanın. Melek de oradaydı. Çürüyen şu, filizlenen bu diye ayırmadı hiçbirini. Kuru yaprak dediğin gider kompost olur. Biz de bunun için buradayız zaten. Gömülenin üstünü örtmek için değil. Bırakalım da yeni biçimlere can versin diye. Ben de yine soruyorum işte, tam eşiğinde durup hayatın. Sen kendine özgü bir bahar mısın? Vaktiyle toprağa gömülmüş ne varsa içinden hala yaşam sürüyor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aylin. I was one of the lucky ones to be able to hear it in both languages, and it touched me deeply. Thank you. So we are also honored today to have Narin Yükler join us. Narin Yükler is an exiled Kurdish poet and human rights defender. She was born in Viranşehir of Urfa in Turkey in 1988. In the early 2010s, she was active in various non-governmental and human rights organizations, especially women's rights organizations. In 2011, she was sued by the government because she participated in the press statement of the Şanlıurfa Human Rights Association. And in 2014, she was sentenced to 10 and a half years of imprisonment due to that case. And that's why she had to quit her work and flee to the city of Duhok in the Kurdistan regional government with her husband and 40-day-old newborn. Many of her stories and poems are written about Middle Eastern, especially Kurdish women. They were published in several countries across the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas. She held meetings in refugee camps where she read her poems written in Turkish and Kurdish languages. And she has also written theatrical plays on human and women's rights, some of which have been staged. So it's a great honor to have you with us today, Narin. I pass it on to you.
Thank you. I want to say hello to everyone. I will read my poem in Kurdish language. Şikeftamın. Lerizin zanyariya heri kevne mroviye. Dilerizm. Siya tavana liser ruyete. Her ku desten min bisinga tedbe, beje ey dilê min. Ey dilê min e kirasa tirsê li ber xwe dike. Ji avên vê şartî nereve. evrê bo dergeheke teng e. Dizanim dirêka dîndar û siyasetmedaran da qedexeya maçî kirin. Dîsa jî bibêjim bisa sindikek û avên veşartî herî bûya di nava şîkefta min de. Xezalek hatibûya ber û bi lingên xwe yên tirsî dimeşiya nava avê de. Ev çax mine bigota amîn. Amîn waya ez dijîm. Destê min li rezîbûya wekî li rezîbûna kêşeyekî încîlê dixwînit. Ve demê ez jî dengê xwe ya yakût bînim der ji hemî sindokan. Ji ber ku tu keskî. Tu keskî ez gewr û qasî rabirdûyekî kevn û risasî. Nûkê demjimêran dihêjmêrim. 37 demjimêr û 14 xulek bûye ev şev. Ku te zanibûya, tu yê li rizibûya. Min kolaye ev gorî. Min daniye vî pêrî. Ev mirin bo te ye. Êdî şîkefta min şil û rengê qehweyî ye. Spas. Thank you for everyone.
Spas. Thank you so much, Narin, for this very touching and inspiring poem. Just as a reminder to everyone, there's a document that has been shared by Rawadari in the chat, so you can look at that document and read the English translation of these poems. So Narin's poem in Kurdish, in English, is titled My Cave. Okay. Third, we will move to a Syrian poet, Reem Aksiri. Unfortunately, Reem is based in Syria and does not have internet connection now, but she was kind enough to send us a video of her reading. So we will be watching the video soon. Let me first introduce her. Reem Aksiri is a Syrian lawyer and human rights expert specializing in international law, torture documentation, and transitional justice. Based in Vienna, she works with former detainees and torture survivors from Syria and has collaborated with the European Union, the United Nations, and academic institutions on human rights and accountability initiatives. She's also a Syrian poet and novelist. Her published works include the poetry collection, Thoughts of the Stray Seagulls, while her novel Crimson Clouds, the poetry collection I Once Had Two Wings, and the novel Ishtar's Star are forthcoming. So now we'll listen to the video of Reem Aksiri reading her poem. Do we have a technical issue?
في الطريق البعيد هاجرت في مطلع فجر لم يطلع هناك تسربت بين حقول الوحل وأنين المساء سمعت انهيار الزمن المحمول على الأكتاف، رأيت غرق القوارب في البحار كالورق يجرح وجه الملح في الماء. منحت صوتي للصدى بينما يتلاشى العمر والتاريخ في حرائق أرضي، وتنبت أصوات الأشباح في الغابات دليلا حائرا خائفا في الطرقات. مثل حكاية بتول ما زالت في الخيال. تسلقت جبلا في الجزيرة الموحشة، تهت على سكة قطار واستعدت عافية الطريق، وحيدة غريبة مبللة بحزن غامض يمزق سنيني بين راحتي الطريق، مضمومة اليدين والعواطف مشردة يسري نهاري في ليلي. هبت رياح كثيرة، أرواح تصرخ في كل مكان.
I can introduce some of our Afghan poets while our colleagues figure that out. We apologize for the technical glitch. We were hoping to have 3 Afghan poets with us today. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, they were not able to join us, but I would still like to acknowledge them. Dr. Shafiqa Yarqindi Baj, a prominent Afghan poet, writer, researcher from Sarapul province of Afghanistan, considered one of first Uzbek women in Afghanistan to write poetry professionally in Uzbek and Persian. Through her poetry, research, and cultural work, she has made important contribution to Afghanistan's literary landscape, and her writing that reflects experiences, struggles, and the resilience of women of Afghanistan. We were also supposed to have Miss Amina Fana from inside Afghanistan to join us, an Afghan poet whose work centers on the lives, struggles, and resilience of Afghan women and girls. Through her poetry, she explores themes of identity, freedom, dignity, and hope, amplifying women's voices. You can look at both of these amazing poets' poetry in the Google Doc we have shared. And lastly, Miss Mariam Mitra, a researcher, journalist, and poet. She received a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in sociology in Berlin. Her first poetry collection, Life on the Margin, was published in Persian in Kabul in 2013. Her second poetry collection features poems in Persian and German and was published by Wilston Verlag in Germany in 2023. Her poems have appeared in numerous German and English language anthologies and have been translated into English, Arabic, and Norwegian. I will read one of her poems as she has allowed us to read it on her behalf. I will hope to do justice to it. I will read the English translation. Woman in War. The deep graves in our hearts fill with memories of men who do not return from war. The deep graves in our hearts fill with the rage of women who did not go to war. War continues in my head since childhood, since long ago, hazy nights in another city, another country, and even now in this city, still and filled with stars. War keeps going in my head. Wherever I stand, wherever I go, wherever I hide, it faces me and talks with me. It's here too, behind this door. It stands behind curtains and windows, reaches to trace my wounds, fresh and timeless. The lot of women who fall in love in war, who sing in war, their voices drowned by bullets, shrill. They run away from war and they are forgotten in war, but do not forget the men who did not return from war. I just want to check with our tech colleagues if we are able to watch the video recording. Thank you. We don't have audio.
كل غناء بداخلي هزته الريح فأثمر أوراقا وطيورا وعصافير، وكل ما تركه الشعراء السابقون من قصائد تضيء ليل أحلام. ينبت العشب ينبت العشب وصوت حجر الصوان قاسم يلين بين شفتي القصائد. تزهر في الحقول فصاحة الريح تزهر في الحقول فصاحة الريح. أنت قصيدتي، ما بال الكلمات فقدت الدهشة، وكل حنين طريق يمشي إليك. أمي أمي لا ترحلي قبل أن تنتهي الأغاني، أمي لا ترحلي قبل أن تنتهي الأغاني. يغرد عصفور هجر قلبي وطار، يقول قلبي ويتنهد. إنه إنه سرد طويل في لجة العالم المتسارع إلى النهايات. هناك بوح خفيف هناك بوح خفيف كنسمة على خد صبية، يتخلل المدى مجازا، يقبل وجنتيها العطش، ويرتمي على حضنها سرج خيل يطير. غير مكترثة غير مكترثة كوني في مهب الريح شجرة، خلقت هادئة. ثمة طيور رفرفت بعيدا عن ذاك، ولونا أرجوانيا يخفق خلف الجبال. بحنو عجوز تمد عروق يديها في القلب وترحل، بحنو عجوز تمد عروق يديها في القلب وترحل. كان لي دائما جناحان كان لي دائما جناحان أحلق بهما في الأشعار الحزينة. كان لي دائما جناحان أحلق بهما في الأسفار البعيدة، أحلق بهما في الأشعار الحزينة. كفراشة تقول أسوأ ما في الأمر، لا يوجد حياة أخرى تضيء بعد النار. كالنرجس يقول وحيدا أتجول في المرايا. كالنرجس يقول وحيدا أتجول في المرايا. وكأني النهر أمشي برفق كي لا أوقظ المدينة. هكذا هي الحياة اترك الأشياء والأسفار والحكايا. اترك الأشياء والأسفار والحكايا على حالها. اتركها يقول الزاهد وقلبي. راس الشمس أشجار الأفق، ضوء في المغيب يخبو. قليل من كل شيء يذكر آخرتي، وكثيره مرثية التانوب على ضفتيه. عذرية الغابات، امرأة قررت أن تجعل يومها عامرا بالسعادة، تدخل ظلها وترميه في النهر يرتاح وهو يطفو. تنتزع بيديها ملابسها والذكريات، وتنصت للفراغ. هزمت قالت هزمت، وتمددت على أطراف الانتظار قاربا هائما هاربا. دفعته في النهر برفق واصطادت ظلها. هل يرتوي النسيان من الذكريات؟ هل يرتوي النسيان من الحكايات؟ هل يرتوي النسيان من الذكريات؟ هل يرتوي النسيان من الحكايات؟ في الطريق البعيد هاجرت في مطلع فجر لم يطلع هناك، فسردت بين حقول الوحل وأنين المساء. سمعت انهيار الزمن المحمول على الأكتاف. رأيت غرق القوارب في البحار كالورق يجرح وجه الملح في الماء. منحت صوتي للصدى بينما يتلاشى العمر والتاريخ في حرائق أرضي، وتنبت أصوات الأشباح في الغابات دليلا حائرا خائفا في الطرقات. مثل حكاية بتول مثل حكاية بتول ما زالت في الخيال. تسلقت تسلقت جبلا في الجزيرة الموحشة. تهت على سكة قطار واستعدت عافية الطريق، وحيدة غريبة مبللة بحزن غامض يمزق سنيني بين راحتي الطريق. مضمومة اليدين والعواطف مشردة يسري نهاري في ليل. هبت رياح كثيرة، أرواح تصرخ في كل مكان. أحييها وأمضي. تنصت الملائكة لوقع أقدامي وتمطر السماء كلما بكيت. كل الإشارات قادتني إليك. كل الإشارات قادتني إليك. حتى عبرتني فسكنتني وكنت سقناك.
Thanks to our tech colleagues for facilitating that, and thank you for your patience with us as we figured that out and navigated through. I think that brings us to the end of our poetry reading portion of this today's event. You are welcome to post any questions and reflections in the Q&A box. For now, I can see two questions, one for Nareen, which I will request Aisha Gul to translate as needed. How does the poem explore the relationships between fear and desire, and how does this motive of trembling contribute to this tension? I will get to the other questions after we hear from Nareen.
So Meral has already provided the Turkish. Şiir korku ile arzu arasındaki ilişkiyi nasıl ele alıyor ve titreme motifi bu gerilime nasıl katkıda bulunuyor diye sormuş Narin'e.
Tekrar duyabilir miyim acaba?
Tabii ki. Şiir, Meral Akkent sormuş soruyu Narin. Şiir, korku ile arzu arasındaki ilişkiyi nasıl ele alıyor ve titreme motifi bu gerilime nasıl katkıda bulunuyor diye sormuş.
Arzu ile
Korku
sesinizi ben
arasındaki
tamam.
ilişki.
Arzu ile korku arasındaki ilişki.
Evet.
Bu şiirde ben aslında biraz sürgünlükten uzak yazmaya çalıştım bu şiiri. Yani o hislerden uzak yazmaya çalıştım. Biraz tutkuyu ön plana çıkarmaya çalıştım. Biraz erotik temalarla süslemeye çalıştım. Bunu yapmaya çalışırken elbette insanın en hassas olduğu konulardan biri korkuları. Korkularıyla tutkuyu birleştirmem için de hem korktuğumuz zaman hem de tutkulu hissettiğimiz zamanlarda ki göstermiş olduğumuz efektlerden biri de titremek. Onunla bütünleştirmeye çalıştım ben de.
Bu kısmını çevirmek
Anlatabildim mi?
istersen, bir şey eklemek istersen sonra ekle.
Evet, teşekkür
So
ederim lütfen.
Narin says that she has tried to stay away from the state of being in exile while composing this poem. And the poem focuses on passion, and there are erotic themes there as well. And as she's exploring passion, she's exploring one of the fundamental feelings, which is fear. And so the poem looks into this intimate relationship between passion and fear. And a theme that runs across both is trembling. Başka bir şey eklemek ister miydin Narin?
Evet, lütfen. Şiirin bir yerinde şey söylüyorum. Dreka dindar u siyaset medaranda, yani dindarların ve siyasetçilerin yolunda kadahaya maçikırın. Öpüşmek yasaktır.
Hmm.
Yani hem sevdiğimiz zaman, hem korktuğumuz zaman, hem bir şeylere arzuladığımız zaman titriyoruz. Onu anlatmaya çalıştım. Şiirimin sonunda da Evmir'in boteye, bu ölüş senin için. Edi şikef damışıl, yani artık benim mağaram ıslak. Urenge kahveye ve kahverengidir diyorum. Yani titremeyi bu şekilde tanımlayabiliyorum.
Çok teşekkürler. Sağ olasın.
Yeah.
So in one part of the poem, I talk about the faithful, the leaders of faith, and the politicians making it impossible for passion to express itself. And trembling comes across as an outcome of both fear and passion. And I end the poem, Narin says, with these lines. I have dug this grave, I have laid this stone. This death is for you. My cave is damp and brown.
Eğer çok kısa vakit varsa bir şey daha eklemek istiyorum, çok özür dilerek.
Tabii.
Arkadaşların vaktini de almak istemiyorum. E, bir dizeyi tekrar etmek istiyorum. E, şurada diyorum ki bu aslında kakve bu ya. Yani bu böyle bir sandık açılsa o aven ve şartı heri kubuya adına şikeftamında gazalek hatı buya ber. Bir ceylan gelse o gizli suların önüne. O bilingen xoyen tırsi korkak ayaklarıyla. Dimeşiya yürüse. Nava aveda o suyun içinde. Orada da aynen o ceylanın korkak ayaklarıyla, yani titrek ayaklarıyla o suyun kenarına gelmesiyle insanın hem korkularına karşı hem de arzularına karşı takındığı tavrı anlatmaya çalıştım.
In one part of the poem, I write, if only a chest had opened like that, if only this path had broadened so much, and the hidden waters had moved within this cave, if a gazelle had come to its edge and walked into the water with its fearful legs. So here I was trying to draw attention to the ways in which we can approach both passion and fear in the form of the gazelle with its fearful legs coming towards the water. Thank you so much, Narin. Çok teşekkürler.
Thank you, Noreen. Thank you, Ayşegül. I have
Thank you
another question in the chat, but I invite you to place any reflections that you may have in the chat, and also Ayşegül will share some prompts in the chat with the support of our tech colleagues that you can respond to in the Q&A, or after the event we will share ways through which you can share messages with us. The next question is from Karima Banoun, a dear friend of Afghanistan, a former SR for Cultural Affairs. Thank you for joining us today and listening in. I will pose this question to Shaharzad from Rawadari. Thank you for this beautiful and inspiring event. Can you please talk about the particular difficulties facing Afghan women poets and artists in these times, the role of creative expression in contemporary Afghan women's struggles, and or what kind of international solidarity with these important cultural rights defenders is most useful now? Passing on to Shaharzad to respond.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Banoun, for attending the event and for your thoughtful question. Of course, you're very familiar with some of the aspects of the question, both due to your work as SR on cultural rights, and at that time you were working closely with women of Afghanistan, and also in your continued work in the past few years around the struggles of Afghan women for codification of gender apartheid. But thank you for that question. I mean, I think for Afghanistan, for Afghans, poetry is such a part of daily life. It has always been. And ordinary people who have never studied or had an education or had gone to school are also very familiar with poetry. Poetry of Hafiz, poetry of Ferdowsi, poetry of Sadi is part of the daily language and proverbs and ways of making sense of the world. So it's a very important element. But of course, women's voices and their poetry has always been somehow at the sidelines. It has been repressed, it has been given less room to grow, and it has been actively erased as well multiple times in our history, not just by the Taliban. What we see right now with the Taliban is this complete act of erasure that they're trying to achieve because they are afraid of women's knowledge as well. They want to delegitimize women's knowledge, all forms of knowledge by women, by closing the schools up to women. But that's just one aspect that we see, the public aspect, that they're closing the schools, they're closing the universities. They're removing books that talk about women. They're removing names of women from the books. They are removing books written by women and about women from bookshops and libraries. So it's a complete assault. Women poets who have continued to write cannot publish their works in Afghanistan now. They cannot make that work physically accessible to the Afghan population. So it's a complete battle against women's voice, women's poetry. And so in this context, it's really important to continue to read poetry of Afghans and poetry of Afghanistan, particularly women's poetry. Of course, Taliban have also tried to attack poetry in all forms, even when it comes from men, unless it's poetry that's praising them in their way or their ideology that's aligned with their ideology. So one of the most popular criticisms of Taliban's bans on education usually came from men poets who were reading poetry in annual poetry festivals. We have an annual Orange Flower Festival, Poetry Festival in Nangarhar. We have other poetry festivals across the country, and poets have in the past few years have been detained and harassed because they read poetry here supporting women or revoking the Taliban and their policies. For women, particularly for women poets, I'm really inspired to say that Afghan women's poetry in the last few decades has found new life. There are so many new poets writing. There were considerable group of Afghan poets in exile or as refugees in Iran. So the women's poetry really took off there as more women in Iran as refugees found access to education. And then in that there were literally spaces created. So many of those women are now prominent poets. I can name Mahbouba Ibrahimi, I can name Shukriya Urfani, I can name Maral Tahiri. These are some of the really established and prominent poems that write around themes of gender, of exile, of motherhood, of love, of war, and they have really incredible and powerful poetry. We also had a new generation of women poets growing up in post-Taliban Afghanistan. So we had new poetry emerging in different languages from different parts of Afghanistan. We have Shafiqa Khalwak, who is an incredible Afghan poet writing poetry in Pashto. She's currently in exile in the US. We had Mahtab Sahel. She's an incredible poet writing in Farsi. She's now currently in Iran, and many, many more who are now, they're across the world, mostly living as refugees or in transition or in exile. We also have women inside Afghanistan writing and publishing poetry via social media, changing their names, changing their, not showing their face, sometimes even showing their face and posting their poetry to social media, but trying to avoid poetry that might become too controversial, but trying to keep a voice alive. I know Shafiqa used to work with a group of women who are writing stories and poetry in Pashto, young girls who are running a poetry circle. And before the Taliban, a lot of young women would send their poetry because there was also a cultural pressure in some families. The men didn't want the names of their sisters to be known publicly. They didn't want their poetry, which was love poetry, to be broadcast publicly. So women would phone in radio programs and read their poetry without, mentioning their name. Just incredible poetry. You never knew the poets, but you knew you had the privilege of listening to this poetry, mostly love poetry. There's also a very strong culture of oral poetry and singing in Afghanistan that started to dim with as technology advanced and as people started playing like pre-recorded music everywhere. But when I was a child, every village, every community had a few women who were very famous for their singing, and they would sing the poetry we don't know who has authored these poems, but these are Dubaitis usually, and they have themes like around forced marriage or around love or around exile, around Musafri, which I really like, being a passenger, being an exilee, which is a very prominent theme, surprisingly, for a long time in our culture. So there was a lot of that would be passed chest to chest, generation to generation, and they were very obviously authored by women. We just didn't know who. Where I grew up, these were mostly in Uzbek, but also in Farsi. In Pashto, there is a specific poetry format, Landai, which is, again, we don't know the authors, but it's a lot about women's desire and women's sexuality and women's love, but also about social justice, about politics, about many different issues, including from women's perspective. You have asked how we can stand in solidarity, how can we support women's Afghan cultural community. I think, we have I will send some names in the chat of people, of collections of poetry published by Afghan women, now accessible in English or other languages, some poets whose works you can follow online, and you can look at their work online and support them in that way, read their poems, and follow their work. There is also, of course, Afghanistan has an orchestra in exile that sometimes sings and uplifts the songs of Afghan women. This is an all-woman orchestra called Zohra. We have a very active music, and our music is also very reliant on poetry, a very active music scene, again in exile, because Taliban destroy musical instruments and don't allow music. So there are many different ways in which you can look at Afghanistan from a different perspective, not news. You can listen to its poetry, you can listen to its literature, and I'm sure it will be a gift to you, and it will be a gift to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahrazad, for that reflection, and Karima for the question. I have another question here in the chat to Eileen. What does it mean to you to become a spring onto yourself? I leave it to you if you want to respond in English or Turkish, however you feel comfortable.
Thank you for the question, Meral. If I may, I might also show an image here, because this poem emerged from a collage work I did for my dissertation work. Let me see if I will be able to share this image. Then it will make more sense, maybe. Let's see if it's gonna come out. Oh no, I have to make it smaller. Yes, I think this is gonna work now. Sorry about that. Yes, this was the image, and it's actually in this image through the notion of spring, actually meant the season spring, but also your take on spring as a source makes sense here, I would say. There's the daisy, the dried leaf, the hand emerging from a very dry and dark soil. And because I worked with a contested past regarding the Armenian women in Turkey, I was also working through silence. How to work with silence was a question, my starting question for my work. Inherited silence mostly, this is what I worked with. For me, being a spring unto yourself does not simply mean breaking the silence or just leaving the past behind. It means listening to what the silence holds and allowing it to take another form. So I love your reading of spring as a source too in Turkish kaynak, because that meaning is also present in the image, I would say. The dried leaf and the flower are held within the same frame as a spring, as a source too. What has fallen away does not disappear. It becomes part of the ground from which another form of life can emerge. So to be a spring unto yourself may mean finding a source of movement and renewal within what has been inherited, silenced, or buried. But it doesn't really mean to be self-sufficient. And a spring emerges through soil, water, memory, and other lives and relationships also. I can try to translate this into Turkish too. I will try to do it as quickly as I can. Actually, Türkçe söylemeye çalışacağım şimdi biraz evvel söylediklerimi. Bu şiir yaptığım bir kolaj çalışmasından ortaya çıktı. Ve kolaj çalışmasının ismini de kendine özgü bir bahar mısın diye kurgulamıştım. Öyle çıktı. Çok da anlamı yoktu o zamanlar benim için ama Meral'in de oradaki spring'i, bahar da demek, kaynak da demek. Aslında kaynak olarak okuması da çok ilgimi çekti. Baharı ben bir mevsim ve gömülmüş olandan canlı bir şeyin doğabilme ihtimali olarak düşünmüştüm. Çünkü sessizlik, Ermeni kadınların Türkiye'de zorlu geçmişler ve aktarılmış zorlu geçmiş hikayelerle nasıl yaşadıklarına dair, bunlarla nasıl baş ettiklerine dair bir test çalışması yürütmüştüm. Geçmişten alınan miras alınan sessizliklerle bugün de kadınların yaşamlarını kuşatmaya devam eden sessizliklerle ilgilenen bir çalışmaydı bu. İnsanın kendi bir bahar olması sadece sessizliği bozmak değil veya geçmişi geride bırakmak değil, sessizliğin içinde taşıdıklarına da kulak vermeyi kapsıyordu. Ve onların başka bir biçime de bürünmesine izin vermek anlamına geliyordu. Yine de bu baharı kaynak olarak okumak çok da hoşuma gitti. Çünkü kurumuş yaprakla çiçek de aynı karede bir arada duruyor. Düşüp de geride kalan şey kaybolmuyor. Bu da bir kaynak hali. Başka bir yaşam biçiminin filizlenebileceği toprağın parçası haline geliyor bu resimdeki her şey. İnsanın kendi bir bahar olması veya kendi özgü bir bahar olması da miras alınmış, sessizliğe gömülmüş ya da üzeri örtülmüş olanın içinden bir hareket ve yenilenme kaynağı bulması anlamına da gelebilir bu bağlamda. Ama kendi kendime yeterim, her şeyi yapabilirim anlamında değil. Kaynak içimizde olabilir fakat hiçbir zaman yalnızca bize ait değildir ve her şeyin de bir zamanı vardır. Her çiçeğin açılması için de kendi zamanına ihtiyaç vardır. Belki bu şekilde özetleyebilirim.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Aylin.
Thank you. Thank you for that beautiful response. I do not see any more questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. I want to take this opportunity to once again thank our colleagues, our poet colleagues, for joining us, for giving us their time and allowing us listen to their beautiful poetry. I will now pass it on to Miral for her remarks and introduction of the Connecting Voices Strengthening Solidarity exhibition. The floor is yours, Meral.
And as Meral is logging on, I can also remind everyone that we have shared 3 prompts for you to respond to. You can, of course, respond to your own prompt as well. We welcome you to contribute to this dialogue, to this conversation. And if it's okay for you, we will be using your contribution as part of the exhibit that Meral is now going to talk to us about. On to you, Meral.
Hello to everyone. I'm so really very happy to be with all this marvelous women today, and warm greetings to all of you from the collective of Istanbul Gender Museum. Some words about our museum maybe. First, Istanbul Gender Museum is a virtual museum. It focuses on gender, equality, women's rights, and LGBTQI's lives and experiences. Its exhibitions open up a platform for individuals to share their stories. Now, connection to this event today, we believe that each individual should have the right to be heard and to tell its own story. We also believe the importance of international solidarity and cooperation across borders. Together, we are strong. The museum's new international project reflects this commitment. It is called, as Ayşegül in the beginning told, Connecting Voices, Strengthening Solidarity. It is a global exhibition of solidarity. It is created in cooperation with our wonderful partners, Rawadari, Femena, and Earth Sky Solidarity with Ayşegül and Aylin. This exhibition is a way of showing our solidarity with the women and girls of Afghanistan. It is not only with women and girls in Afghanistan, also in Turkey and also in other parts of the world. Women and girls in Afghanistan have been facing severe restrictions since the Taliban took power in 2021. As Shahrazad Akbar and Zubayda Akbar explained to us in detail, their most basic rights have been taken away. But as we heard now, Afghan women and girls continue to resist. They continue to speak, create, write, make music, and express themselves with great courage and creativity. The virtual exhibition, Connecting Voices, Strengthening Solidarity, brings together voices from around the world to celebrate the courage of Afghan women. We invite artists, activists, collectives, and individuals to take part. You can contribute in many different ways by sending a short video message, a photograph, an illustration, a poem, a piece of music, or another creative work. Your contribution will say you are not alone. It will show support for Afghan women and girls and also around the world, and help to imagine a more just and hopeful future. You do not need to be an artist or an expert to participate. Every voice is welcome. You can contribute in any language. English translations or subtitles are welcome, but not required. The exhibition respects your privacy. If participating publicly would create a risk for you, you can contribute anonymously or use a pseudonym. You can also hide your face or alter your voice. The deadline for submissions is the 20th of September, 2026. If you would like to participate, use the registration link given in the chat. You are warmly invited to join this project. And now we want to show a small video, a short video about our invitation. Shehlam, I think it's your turn. Can you make that?
گر تن بدهی دل ندهی کار خراب است چون خوردن نوشابکی در جام شراب است منم من زنم من جهانم که از آزادی و مهر خوانم
Sardunya, yasadır, anımsatalım. Tohum ekenlerin, fide dikenlerin, kimse durduramaz yağmurunu. Güneşini kimse kesemez.
Hola, compañeras. We are from Mexico, and we just want to let you know that your voices matters, and we hear you around the world.
إلى نساء أفغانستان القويات المناضلات لنيل حقوقهن وحرياتهن.
For justice and equality in Afghanistan.
My name is Hilary Power. I'm the UN Geneva Director for Human Rights. I stand in solidarity with Afghan women and girls. I'm in awe of their courage, their resilience, and I believe in their power.
You're on mute, Meral. We can't hear you.
I just wanted to say that I hope that we will create altogether a marvelous exhibition to encourage us and to encourage other women and girls all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Miral, for that beautiful presentation and for introducing the exhibition. As Miral was speaking, we received one more question, and I will just take the liberty to pose this question also for an answer, because we have a little bit of time, and then following that, Aishagul, once it has been responded, I request you to close our event today. So I'm posing this question again to Shahrazad. It's from Savidan. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, and I'm not, I apologize. Were there any cultural exchanges, thematic poems, the old ones, Those were passed from generation to generation between different ethnic groups of women pre and post-Taliban times, like between Hazaras and Pashtuns and Uzbeks. This is a question that I'm posing to Shahrazad. Thank you in advance.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. Yes, there were opportunities for exchanging. Of course, many of the, the events, for instance, where I grew up in Aqcha, when in Jawzjan in North Afghanistan, when there were weddings, all neighbors are invited, and these neighbors may be from different communities. And there are songs sang, of course, in Uzbek, but also in other languages of Afghanistan. So informally, because of how ethnically diverse and mixed Afghanistan is, particularly in urban areas where different communities may live close to each other and have interactions and marriages and relationships with each other. Sharing happens in that informal ceremonies, and there are many different ceremonies, from weddings to circumcision ceremonies to, and there are multiple ceremonies around the wedding, for instance, itself. So there are forms of sharing that happens there. There are forms of happening that used to happen in shrines, on specific events like celebrating, let's say, prophets' birthday. So there are different kinds of cultural ceremonies that allows people to come together and share poetry and song in different languages with each other because of familial or neighborly relationships or community relationships that existed. But also during the Republic, there were different cultural associations, some specific to one language in one community. So, for instance, associations that worked on, Pashto language or Uzbek or Farsi. And there were also national associations and languages. There were national events that would bring together poets from across Afghanistan to recite their poetry. There were national award ceremonies for poetry as well, that people from different languages poetry from different languages would be recognized. And there were ones that were specific to a specific community or specific language. So there were ways in which women poets learned about each other's work and could draw on each other's work and come together to listen to poetry from each other. And when I think as more and more people started using social media and radio and TV, also women's poetry, people found access to women's poetry and poetry in general from different communities, different languages. So as that spread, there was also kind of a wider audience. People would, follow the poetry of a specific poet that they liked, who may be writing poetry in a different language, or maybe from a different community. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Shahrazad Jan, for your wonderful contributions. As I was listening to you, I became even more excited to learn more about Afghan women's writing, especially poetry. I do hope more of it gets translated to the languages that we can read. And today was really a precious opportunity to listen to each other's language, poetry, words of passion. Before I move on to my own closing remarks, I want to read a comment that's been written by Özlem Altok, a representative of İşik, Women's Platform for Equality based in Turkiye, that has shown solidarity with Afghan women, in these past 5 years in many different forms, organizing webinars in Turkish and English, bringing us together with Afghan activists. So Özlem Altok writes, to the women and girls of Afghanistan, I want to say that we have great respect for you and your continued resistance, whatever form it takes, even in the most adverse circumstances. As a member of the Women's Platform for Equality, İşik, I can say this with confidence. We will continue to stand in solidarity with you and work against the normalization of the Taliban and their gender apartheid regime. As we say in İşik, we do not give up on our rights, lives, and dreams. Hayatlarımızdan, haklarımızdan, hayallerimizden vazgeçmiyoruz. So, what a beautiful, poetic form of expressing ourselves, our resistance. And I think solidarity can be an embodiment of poetry, as today's event has been and has shown us. There are three slogans, very poetic slogans of resistance used in the feminist movement in Turkey. And I want to add with those three slogans, one of them is, "You will never walk alone." And I think today we said that all out loud to the women and girls of Afghanistan and all the women in this region and beyond who are facing dreadful circumstances. We will never walk alone. The second one is kadın kadının yurdudur. A woman is another woman's home or homeland. I love that too, because I think, again, solidarity acts like this remind us that we are each other's home. We can be each other's home. And it was truly touching to be a part of this invitation to feel ourselves as each other's home today. And the third slogan, which speaks directly to today's event, is "Dayanışma yaşatır." It's probably one of the most frequently used feminist slogan in Turkey. Solidarity keeps us alive. And of course, aliveness is not the opposite of death. It's not just the physical aliveness we're talking about. Aliveness is about living life fully with the passion that we have heard in the voices and words of the poets who joined us today. Despite all the difficult stories they have heard in their research and advocacy and have experienced in their own lives, the passion that comes out of their words is truly inspiring. And that is an invitation, I think, for all of us to live life fully in its full intensity, and to do that all together. This, I think, was an extraordinary event, bringing together the words, voices, and passion of poets from across our deeply wounded earth, reminding us about the power of poetry, of creativity, and of solidarity. And again, I would like to express my deep gratitude and deep admiration for all the women and girls of Afghanistan, of Femena and Rawadari, who are engaged in the most creative acts of resistance and solidarity and critique. I would like to thank all the poets who joined us today. And because of all these things that we're talking about, some of them could not join us, but their words will have accompanied us and will accompany us as we move towards the exhibit curated by the Istanbul Gender Museum. And thank you to all of you, all our participants, for being here. Please stay in touch, share with us, as Meral was asking all of us to do, a photograph, a word, a sentence, a poem, a song. One of the prompts we had here was asking you to share songs, because as Sharzad Jan was saying, in recent years, not only have Afghan women have written poetry in all its beautiful forms, and also there have been amazing songs written by women, for women, by women, played by women. So we can also add our song to their voices. One of the most courageous acts of women in Afghanistan has been to go out in the streets and sing. So let us join our voices to them, whether it's us singing or by sharing a song for us to include in lists that we will prepare in solidarity with the women of Afghanistan. So please contribute. We invite all of you to contribute in whatever form you would like to express your words of solidarity and passion and aliveness, to let the women and girls of Afghanistan know that they're not alone. None of us are alone. And with those words, I would like to end and perhaps pass it on to Zubayda Jan for her final remarks. Thank you, all of you. I feel deeply humbled and grateful to be here today with all of you.
Thank you, Aishagul. Thank you to all of our guests, our participants, our poets. I don't think I can end this event any better and do justice to your beautiful closing. I wish everyone a happy and peaceful rest of the day or night, depending where you are. And thank you again for joining us. Take care.